This is your same laser, it's just a different handpiece. Like I said, they change them all the time. You know, a year or two, they may change them again. Almost like changing purses. You know, I keep the same handle. So anyway, so if you have never used an Nd:YAG, then bring it down to like 3 watts or maybe 2.5 watts. But as you get better and better, you know how fast your hand speed. Hand speed's crucial on this. Okay? So Nd:YAG has an affinity for hemoglobin, so it's going to remove the disease pocket lining. And this is what you remember. Don't go past the mucogenital junction here, unless you have to. And don't try to remove all the granulation tissue. So periodontists by nature have been trained to lay full flaps, train everything down to bone. Okay, and make sure there's no granulation tissue because we've never been able to kill the bacteria, so we had to remove everything, aerate all above. Well, now we can kill bacteria, sterilize the granulation tissue, and it actually becomes a framework in the more shallow pockets for regeneration and prevents recession. That's recession. Now, if you're doing bone grafting, you got to lay it back, clean all the way down to the base of the bone. Defect, you put your bone in there. You're not going to put your bone in the granulation tissue. And while you're doing that, you have photobiomodulation. So, in '94, remember the Nd:YAG came out in like 1989. By '94, there was a study that said, a histological study that said that Nd:YAG will take 100% of the epithelium out. That's inflamed because of the pigment, okay? And it leaves the connective tissue. So that's one of our studies. Yeah. They're only here for another half hour. Okay, so Nd:YAG is going to remove the disease epithelial line by selectively separating it from connective tissue. That makes the difference between a diode, which cuts the heat, so it selectively removes connective tissue. It decreases the bacterial load because the first thing you do is killing some bacteria with it. Okay? And it disinfects the pocket, preventing bacteria from going into systemic circulation. You're going to get hemostasis from visualization. Defines your tissue margins, meaning that you get the tissue to start to relax, or tissue tension, and it disinfects the pocket. So your first couple passes with your Nd:YAG does more than you think it does. It does a lot of different things. So this is the case I was telling you about. It was just published. This implant is not mine. I didn't place it. So you can criticize it all you want, because I don't care. But you can see the infrabony pocket. So pay attention to this, because as I show you the follow-up, I think 9 months later, you're going to see those go away. So this is the perfect case to start with. You don't want to start with the infrabony defects that come down to here. I mean, those are ones that we need to do. Papilla retraction to get in there deeper and use these different stem cells. No stem cells were used here. Okay, so we're going to use our Nd:YAG. We're going to use it in MSP, which is your settings here. Okay, the 100 microsecond setting. Use it at 20 hertz. Okay, use 3.5 watts of power. Now, always start at the low end. Now, even if you're using a 400 micron fiber, it will depend on the tissue. It's highly inflamed. Remember, I said you may need to bring it down to 3.5 watts. No. It's always better to bring up the power than to bring it down after you create a disaster. It's easy. This is your timer. Turn your timer off. 300 micron port.
If you were to use a...
Okay, hold on. I don't want to move this. Let me go back. Hold on 1 second here. Okay. So what you're going to do, this is your first step. Okay. This went over the settings. So you're going to numb the patient and you're going to bone sound. Okay, I'm going right down the bone. I'm just checking the implant. Okay, so this is after scaling and rib plate. It's still inflamed. Okay, so this is the perfect case where you want to start because you still have inflammation. So there's our Nd:YAG, and we're going to use this 3 different strokes, whatever stroke works best for you. This is more of a J stroke. Okay, I'm going in, I'm going down about 1 millimeter at a time, maximum 3 millimeters in a site, and then I'm going to go to the distal of the next two. When I'm going to clean it, this is Mr. Clean. Okay, this is how good it cleans it. This takes it right off. So then I'm going to go to the next area, and I do all the distals first. Why? I don't want to overheat the papilla. Okay. And again, it's more of a J-stroke. And you can see as I'm doing that, it's almost like you would think it's like propping, except you're not burning the tissue. You're just taking out the epithelium. And just going gently. See how gentle my handpiece is? You can pull the handpiece right out of my hand. I'm not gripping it like that. It's very gentle. So you can see as I'm starting to do that, you can see that it's starting to open up really nicely. Then after I do all the distals, we'll go back and do all the mesials. And then I'll use a sweeping and just go from mesial to distal after it's all done. So if this is 6 millimeters, I've done only 2 to 3 millimeters. Let it cool, I'll come back and do another 2 or 3 millimeters later after it cools. If you have that in the pocket, so there's my sweeping motion, I'll kind of combining the mesial and the distals. If I leave it in the pocket all 6 millimeters, it's definitely going to overheat that pocket because it can't cool fast enough. Okay, see the amount of bleeding I have? Hardly any. Okay, see my hand motion? It's not like this. It's slow and deliberate. So that's what it should look like after your first pass. So what it's done is kind of taken all the epithelium down to the base. Now if you have a deep pocket, sometimes you may even want to go up and down and get all the epithelium out of there. So those are the settings that you have on your sheet. Okay, now your question.
With your, if you were to use 400 fiber, then you increase a little bit more, right?
Yeah, well you have to see because you don't know.
Setting, let's say equivalent.
I would still start at the base and work your way up. Remember the artist palette? Remember the artist painting there? What do you do? Went back to his palette and changed his colors. You're going to change your settings. This is where you change your settings. That's the beauty of having all those settings. There's no other laser on the market that has all these settings. It's not there to confuse you, by the way. It's just to make it easy.
So if it starts bleeding, then what happens?
It won't start bleeding because you just coagulated it. And if it starts bleeding, just hold the laser in there a little bit longer, but it won't because you just sealed all that. That's the beauty of the NDA. So that was step 1. Okay, step 2 now is the removal of the calculus. Now this is what you were talking about. He said, well, if you're using a fiber and you have it at 2.4 watts, that's over the amount. But I'm using QSP. So QSP, if you remember, is taking your SSP wave and bringing it down to 5 small pulses. But I'm bringing my hertz up by a factor of 5. So now this hertz of 20 is now 100 hertz. So it's very smooth, very fast and very smooth. If you've never used a tip in a pocket, then use the radial tip. It's very hard to damage anything with a radial tip. If you're very good at it, then you can use an end cutting tip if there's lots of calculus. I'm going to show you how to use both. But if you've never done put a tip in there, then and it's hard to get sometimes. You say, well, I could go use it around here, but how about it's in the posterior area? And you're kind of struggling to get in there. So again, when you get really good with your hand, then go to an end cutting tip if you need to. But like Eli say, I use the radial tip about 90% of the time. It's a very versatile tip. So this can go down to 60 watt. This can go down to 60 millijoules, go up to 120. 120 is the maximum. Can't go any higher than that. How do you know? See what's working. And you can't hurt by using too much power here. Okay, you can't hurt anything. Okay, so there's your tooth. So the tooth has calculus on. These are enamel pearls. This is why the tooth is in my hand, because I can't get all those out under the flap. I can't clean inside here under the flap, all this kind of cavity here. So be practical. If you can't clean it, the laser is not a magic wand to make it work. Okay, it's not. The 5 razors are going to have everything they want. It's not going to work. So this is how you remove calculus. Now this is an end cutting tip, Varian end cutting tip. It's at the settings I just told you. And if you look at the sheet, it's erbium YAG, and 20 hertz, 60 to 100 millijoules QSP right on there. Either tip. So this is calculus removal. You're gonna go parallel to the tooth, and you're gonna go in an up and down motion. Look at my hand speed. Let the laser energy, the photoacoustic shock waves, just knock the calculus off. That's what's happening. The shock waves are exploding on the tooth and taking the calculus right off.
You can use the radial tip too.
Pardon me?
You can use the radial tip too.
You can use the radial tip, but the calculus is not going to come off that easily because I'm using the end cut. It will take calculus off, though. Absolutely, it will. The best thing for the radial tip is at the very end because this takes off any residual calculus at all. And that's what I love about lasers. Now, one of the reasons this is in my hand, could you imagine trying to clean up all that out between the rows? You can't. So again, be practical. If you can't, you think you can clean it, don't. But if you notice how clean the tooth got, just a little couple pieces of calculus. So now we're going to go with piezo scalers, cabotrons, and get the rest out of your hand scalers. But that's the next step to remove the calculus. Open up the pocket with the end cutting. If you're using a radial tip, it's a little bit different. I'm going to show you how we do that. Know your anatomy. What does the first premolar look like? Can you clean it? Okay, so this is, if you're going to remove calculus, that was the flat tip I just showed you, but you could use the radial tip also. You're going to use in QSP, which is your settings on your sheet, okay, 60 to 120 millijoules at 20 hertz, 2 to 4 of water, 1 to 2 of air. Now, why 1 to 2 of air? Because the more air you put in does this to the water. Fans out the water. Well, you're working inside the pocket. You want a stream inside the pocket. You don't want it all over the place. You want it down into the pocket. So 1 or 2 of water is all you want. You want that air minimum. And any more than 4 of water, the patient's drowning. Okay, so with the flat end tip, you just saw you're going to keep the tip parallel to the root surface at all times. It's a software update. Get off my screen. What the heck is that? Anyway. Okay, you keep the tip parallel to the root, you go up and down motion. If there's a lot of calculus and you try to go side to side, you may catch on the calculus as you're trying it and you may break the tip. So it's better to go up and down first and then you can go side to side gently, up and down the roots. So that's the end cutting tip. If there's not a lot of calculus, then you're going to use the radial tip. Okay? And both of these tips are going to go all the way down to bone. All the way down to bone. That's what makes it more of an osseous procedure now. You're going right down the bone. And as you go down the bone, you're actually going in and cleaning down all the way to bone, but also creating a little bit of bleeding. And relaxing the flap totally. The flap is totally relaxed. And then you're gonna, after that, you're gonna be able to see all the way down there. It's almost like a mini flap, and you can remove the residual calculus with piezo scalers, the ultrasonic, and then small hand scalers and files as necessary.
How much time do you spend down at the bone? Are you trying to just hit and remove?
You'll see. I'm going to show you. That's the next thing I'm going to show you. Okay. You'll see 2 different tips on there. Okay. So here's the end firing tip. See, I told you to see it soon. Okay. So this is big chunks of calculus, and you're going to see it. Okay. This is not the same patient. Okay. Same settings. Settings don't change. So this is my end cutting tip. Notice an up and down motion. Okay. And I'm walking it around. So how much time am I on the bone? Not very much. Okay. So I'm walking it around, and you can see how that tip fits perfectly in there. Okay, I already used the NDA. And you're going to see right here, the ledge on calculus. See the calculus there?
Yeah.
Now, that tip is not breaking the calculus. It's the shock waves of the water that are breaking that calculus off. The calculus is letting the tip go down. If you put pressure on that, it'll break the tip. So there's no way that I ever put pressure on that I'm going to break that tip. So I'm just walking it around. So you're touching bone and bouncing off, basically. Okay? It doesn't make a difference. You're not going to hurt the bone. You know? See this stuff come out of there? You saw some calculus come out of there. And that's when people get excited when the calculus comes out. They go, oh, wow, look at that. I go, yeah, well, the shock waves are knocking that off. So you're just going to walk all the way around the buckles, and you're going to do the same thing on the linguals. Okay? And as you're doing that, you're going down the bone, and this is also starting to reflect back. So you can see how I'm going in there and just kind of walking it back and forth. And then I can go side to side a little, all the way down to bone. Okay. And again, that handpiece is just floating in my hand, just floating. So you can kind of feel it. Now again, that tip doesn't cut off calculus. If I push too hard on the tip, that tip will break. Okay, that is the end cutting. Now the same settings are for the radial tip. Now the radial tip is, for not as much calculus, but you're gonna open up the flap, take the toxins off through it. Again, the Nd:YAG has been used. Now the radial tip, you can go side to side and watch what happens. I'm going right down the bone. Look at what happens to my tissue. It's opening up really nicely. So as you go down the bone, you created a little flap. So I can see if there's any calculus anywhere, in the furcation, on the root surface, or anything. Now, if it's way deep, that's when we start, that's the advance. We start popping papilla to get in there. We'll go over that next after we do this. Okay. So we just got the radial tip, you just take it all the way around. You take it on the, if there's an area, I mean, you can deepithelialize the tissue with that and go right into proximal. What you don't want to do is go super gingival with it, because you'll cause sensitivity. And when we take off the smear layer, I'll show you that in detail. So now you can see how see how my flap's coming loose, and you can see when she's suctioning, it's got almost the pillows actually pull back. Okay, so we've done everything biologic. Okay, there's nothing here except we haven't used a knife. Nobody says you need to use a knife here. So that's what it means about releasing tissue tension, and then those shock waves. If you notice, my tip is more towards the tooth now than it was with the Nd:YAG going straight down, so towards the tissue. So that will actually start taking some of the toxins off the root surface. Okay, so that's your first two steps. Now after that, you should be able to blow air in there, and as you blow air, you should be able to see all the way down to the base of the bone. Okay, again, you only have 4 to 8 millimeter pockets. Now if you had a 10 millimeter pocket here, that's when you have to flap that back, and you may need to pull it past the medial junction. But right now we didn't. It's minimally invasive. So patients were used to all the big flap surgery and stuff like that. They hardly feel anything with this. Always tell them you're going to hear that popping noise. In fact, I actually showed it to them on my hand, and you're just going to use it, the laser on my hand, hear them popping, and I hold it like this far from my hand, and they go, oh, I go, it's not hurting my hand. Now turn the water off and look for the water in your hand. It'll hurt. So make sure the water is on, because you will have a hole in your hand. It's insane. Okay, so step 3 is your hand instrumentation. Now this is, you do whatever you need to do clean teeth. Sometimes some people have the hygienists come in and do this, okay? Because the hygienists can scale teeth. They love this. Look at the, there's no bleeding. Remember you asked me about bleeding? Do you see any bleeding? Yeah, so that's the beauty of this. Okay? So this is something that you can do in your office. And you should be doing this in your office. Okay. But you're going to use your Cavitrons, you can use piezo scalers, and you'll see I'll use hand instruments in a minute. But see my flap? I can pull it back. See how the pillows are retracted. Do you need to suture those? No, you don't. That's what we use our tissue glue for. Okay. But see how nice that is? So you do whatever you need to do to clean off the calculus. Whatever instruments work the best. We use diamond tipped and smooth surface capitals. We use scalers. We use files. There's our scaler. Again, those root surfaces have to be clean. The laser doesn't allow you to be lazy. No magic wand involved there. But look at the access you have. You remove the epithelial lining. You removed all the calculus. You detoxify the root surfaces by taking the toxins off. Now you are creating a smear layer, and that's what we're going to remove next. Okay, and that's a file where I do all the align angles, get all that stuff out. Now the biggest thing is visualization. So you have to have loops on to make sure you got all the calculus out. Don't ever assume you got it all out. And if you think you didn't, then flap it back and take a look. You'll be surprised sometimes when there's still calculus there. If you have calculus, it's not going to work. Okay, so now we're going to remove the smear layer. and on the sheet it says erbium YAG 30 to 40 hertz MSP. Now this is MSP, it's 100. You use it at 50 too, that's fine. And you're gonna use it at 30 to 40 hertz, okay? 30 to 40 millijoules. So I'm using that on the root of the tooth. Now think about that. If I use 30 hertz and 30 millijoules, that's 0.9 watts. Am I going to hurt the tooth by 0.9 watts? The socket is going to remove the smear layer. It'll cause that little fine edge, but it can't hurt the roots. Even if I use 40 hertz and 40 millijoules, 1.6 watts won't hurt the roots. Not with the radial tip. So, but we don't use QSP here. This is not QSP. Okay, we don't want that to happen. It's the radial firing tip, either 50 to 100 microsecond pulse. Does it make a difference? No, it doesn't make a difference. And again, you want 1 to 2 of air because you want that water to get down there to be flushed in. Okay, so this is how it looks. It's the same thing, but the radial tip now flies through. Now, what I'm doing on that is, here's my tooth. I'm taking the radial